Okay, welcome to the Bitcoin lobby. Today is May 25th, 2023. I'm here with special co hosts Renegade Butcher, Bevo, and Biddish, taking the place of Seth, who is out today. He's got some family obligations. He's going camping with his family a day early. And so we appreciate you guys joining. You guys got stuff, anything written down you want to talk about?
I haven't, but I see puzzles in there. How you going, mate? I
What's
just,
happening, puzzles?
I've made a decision. I'm going to buy two miners, man, and I'm going to ship them to Australia. Fucking unmute yourself. Let's
That's
talk. Can I? Can
rad, man. I'm
uh,
trying to do the same, but fucking Bitmean is kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Well, I'm a bit nervous because you've had that problem. Has that been resolved yet, or?
No, these fuckers at Upstream, man. Um, they're
What
kind
was the
of
issue?
like like I had like bought like an ASIC S19 Pro Plus a while ago, and I had like plugged it in for a little bit to test it out, but it wasn't like it didn't really make sense at the time, like I didn't have the solar panels installed on my roof, and I just kind of wanted to secure the miner, and so like I had it running for a few weeks, everything was good, and then fast forward to like a month ago or whatever, like a few weeks ago, I got my solar turned on, so I started hashing again, and one of the boards went, and actually since then two of the boards went. So I reached out to these guys, and they were like, "Oh, go to Bitmain's site and type in the serial number and check the warranty." So I did that, and then I saw I got like a notification that they wouldn't honor the warranty because of mixed hash boards. I'm like, so I asked them what the hell that was, and I went into the settings, and like I hadn't really been going into the Antminer interface because I was using Brains, so I was using their GUI to like manage the miner and tune it and stuff. And then in the Antminer settings, it said that it had like a S17 control board. So I called these guys out on it. I'm like, what the hell? Like, like I was trying to buy the premium air cooled miner at the time, and it looks like I got some refurbished unit that doesn't have like a warranty, and like nobody told me that. Like, what's going on? And these guys are kind of leaving me hanging. So I have it running, but only one board's working right now, so I'm getting like 35 terahash. But I want to get like two new ones and like figure out how I can repair this other one, while I'm hashing with the two new ones. But yeah, it's kind of a
Well,
disappointing outcome, and Bitmain is like a pain in the ass to deal with. So
That's a bummer. Isn't Bitmain, that was Jihan Wu, right?
Yeah,
That's his company?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what you get, doing business with a big blocker.
Exactly. I think he
Well,
stepped
that's
down the
unfortunate though.
CEO, or he's not the CEO anymore. That he was removed a couple of years ago. I don't know if it was voluntarily or by some other people higher up or something, or company decision. But I don't think he's like the.
well, apart from Bitmain, where else would you go? Puzzles.
well, like a lot of people have been pushing the What's miner, but they don't get nearly as good efficiency. And like the name of the game for me is like get the most efficiency with 1 kilowatt hour. Like I have,
Yeah.
and I plan to do that over time, like because I have the solar now. So like over the next 25 years, as the efficiency of these miners get better, which I don't see them. We talked about that before. I don't see them getting that drastically that much better compared to like the previous generations. The increments of how fast they
Yeah, it's
uh,
going to plateau, diminishing returns. Yeah.
diminishing returns. Yeah, so um, shit, man, it's just like I think like no matter what, like I know Jack has got Block doing some new ones, but I think you just kind of got to roll the dice for the like I told you way back in the day I was mining, and like the S19s are like the AK-47s of miners. They just run. But I'm like trying to find someone else that's running S19s because I don't know if that's the same. If like the longevity of these machines are gonna compare because maybe I just got a bad egg. I don't know.
Well, the reason I was going to buy two is because I'm going to ship them to Australia. So I figured if one went tits up, at least I got one to keep going, and you know I can make one out of two if one goes pear shaped, or two
Well, the
goes
The-
pear
pricing
shaped.
right now is so good. Like I want to average down and have like I have room to run two in that black box. So I could do that.
Yeah, that seems odd that it'd have a S17 board or whatever components inside it. That seems shady to me.
Whether or not they changed the board from the 17 to the 19, just because that was only a controller.
He like this guy, the guy that responded was saying like, "Oh, that's because of the supply chain constraints. They did that, and it's not under warranty." And I'm like, that makes no sense. If anything, it should be under warranty, and it should have been disclosed. Like, why am I being told this now when I'm like having problems? Like, what the fuck? This is ridiculous.
Sounds like freaking Ford trying to find their way out of filling in a warranty. Oh, supply chain issue, so we put the wrong part in, but that violated our terms, so now you don't get a warranty, even though we did it. It sounds like some bullshit. I know next to nothing about miners. I haven't dove into that world, but have you looked at ASICs? I've heard that they're up there with efficiency, and that might be a good path to look at.
What was it now?
I've heard a lot of good things about ASICs. If you don't want to mess with those guys, aren't they a different? Don't they come from a different
Well,
company?
like ASICs are like the chip, so it stands for
Oh,
application
see,
specific integrated circuit. So like
I thought there was
like
actually some ASIC brand miners. Okay.
that's just like the type of chip, and it's like designed to do one thing and one thing only. And so there's only a few manufacturers. It's like literally two manufacturers for the Shay 256 ASIC algorithm. Um, well, the 256 Shay 256 algorithm, like there's only like a few chip manufacturers, fabricators, and Intel actually just kind of folded their cards. They were going to be one, and I guess Block bought out their interest in their chip fabrication plant or whatever. And
Intel never got to consumer, did they? It was all just more of they were selling to the industry, the industrial size miners, right? Or were you
I
able
don't
to
even
buy?
I don't even know if they were even selling them. Like they were like still in the
Right.
R&D kind of stuff because it's like to set up like the manufacturing plant, like you gotta like do the fabrication first, and that's the most expensive and tough part, and then you like kind of they get like royalties in a sense, like over time to pay for all that R&D, and then they can like other they can choose to let other manufacturers produce this but it's like the whole kind of that's the secret sauce, and that's why Bitmain and I don't know the story behind What's Miner, but they're nowhere as close as efficient as
Yeah,
Bitmain.
What's Miner is actually also Bitmain, sort of, because what happened was one of the lead engineers at Antminer, they left and created What's Miner. And so there was like a whole lawsuit and everything about What's Miner, copyright or patent or whatever sort of fight going on. But I think that's all been cleared up now. But yeah, so like What's Miner is essentially a Bitmain clone.
Yeah, so I mean, I think and like I guess like my understanding, Intel's like whole thing was they were gonna sell it by the chip, like whether it was like X amount of chips at once, they weren't gonna like produce a final machine. They were gonna like let the market use their goods to create whatever they wanted, but they kind of threw in the towel for whatever reason, and luckily Block kind of scooped it up. I think it might go down as the acquisition of the century, one of them.
I think it could be really good if they integrate it right, because we had this conversation a while back about just sort of like everything kind of integrating an ASIC into it, right? And so like a lot of the components that goes into a miner itself, revolve around not like other sort of things, ancillary things like networking. There's stuff that has to do with cooling components and so on and so forth. So there's like a lot of like other ancillary sort of stuff that has to go into a like finished miner. But if you have just the chip itself that's actually doing the hashes and everything like that, but you can integrate it into something else that, say, for whatever reason doesn't need cooling, or or already sort of has sort of built-in cooling or whatever, those chips can really, it could change the game. Like, think about like, oh, if your washer and dryer has now an ASIC chip in it, right? If you've got like your AC, or your heating, components of your house have ASICs built into it, that sort of thing, it can really change the game if you can just integrate those chips into everything.
I was talking about that earlier, yeah. So like right now I have a black box and like the heat is being vented into an electric pool heater. And so the pool heater doesn't even like really kick on anymore because it's got a steady flow of hot air. Like at nighttime the pool would drop in temperature. It's like a small pool. But now it just like maintains the temperature, you know? So like that's just a ghetto way to do it, but like you said, once like things are built in, it
I saw a guy
really.
up north that was heating his chicken coop in the winter with an ASIC. I thought that was fucking genius.
What did he do?
He was running an ASIC inside of his chicken coop during the winter so he could keep
Oh,
it warm. He was using the spare heat that thing was putting off to keep it warm enough and there for his chickens to keep laying.
It's
huh.
crazy because like these things like are more efficient at creating heat than space heaters and whatever, because you get the Bitcoin back.
Well, it's proof of work, man. It takes a lot of work to move those blocks around. That's what it is. And the more electronics you're running through a device, the more heat it produces. It's resistance. It's you can't get past the laws of physics. The more you make something work, the more heat it's going to produce. And man, they do a lot of work.
So it's almost like even if they're not efficient, like an S9 isn't really efficient, but if your purpose is to generate heat, right? It is cheaper to heat your whatever with an ASIC than it is like an old S9 than it is to have a space heater. So it's like it's kind of
especially when you
mind-boggling.
especially when you consider the Bitcoin subsidy that comes from it, right? Like, just from a dollar perspective, like dollar electric perspective, it's probably pretty close, if not better. And then you throw on top of the fact that you're getting satoshis, you know, then that
So
just seals the deal.
what if we started building miners into now this would be a challenge because of humidity buildup and everything. I'm sure it's doable though. Started building lightweight miners into air conditioning units so that in a temperate climate during the summer when you've got to run air conditioning, well obviously you don't want to produce heat, so you're not really running your miner, but during the winter you could flip that thing over to heat and actually generate heat for your house and get paid to do so.
Well, the easiest way, and like it took me a while because I'm not an engineer, or I don't know, I just don't like think like that, but it's super easy if you just have your ASICs and direct the heat flow into the register of your HVAC. So you don't even like have to do anything different. You have your regular HVAC system, and then wherever you want, you can like the closer the better to like the main system or whatever. But any register that's like returning air to the HVAC unit, you just pump hot air from the ASICs into the return, and your HVAC unit isn't going to have to work as hard, or it might not even come on after it achieves the temperature. It will hold it
Oh, it
much better.
makes perfect sense if you have, especially if you have central heat. Mine's been out for years, but on top of that, where I live, 9 months of the year I don't want extra heat. In fact, I'm fighting it.
So, like, I don't know if there's incentives where you are, but like in California, there's all sorts of incentives if you go electric for your heating or air conditioning, right? Like, so you literally get like tax credits to do like Bitcoin heating, and if you can kind of if you kind of add it in, it's a little hands-on, but it's not as bad as it seems.
I think
One
a
wouldn't.
big hurdle, an interesting hurdle, would be trying to figure out how to do in like hot climates. How to make these efficient, because obviously in like cold climates in the northern areas, like Bitcoin heating makes absolute sense. But I wonder if there's any sort of application, that that would work well. Whether it has to do with like turbines and heat, sort of recirculate using the heat to run turbines, or something different like that to regenerate some electricity, sort of like how EVs can do like regenerative braking, something like that. I wonder if there's some sort of application for the South,
Oh,
or for
Have a
the
absolutely.
Bitcoin
I
air
mean,
fryer.
absolutely, there is. It's just a heat exchanger, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've just got to work out how you want to use that. I mean, you've stored it when you've made that hot air. You've stored energy, right? So now
Right.
you've just got to capture that energy and put it into a form where you can save it for later. And
You could create an old school boiler and do anything steam powered if you really wanted to boil it down to just actually mechanical work. You
yeah,
know,
I mean,
we
there's
think about it. All the internal combustion engine does is produce heat efficiently. They just harness it.
Like I was even thinking about like British, like to what you said. I was even thinking like it's so efficient at producing heat, and you see all these electric cars coming out. You could literally have these, you know, ASICs, like for the heating in car systems.
How crazy would that be? You make Bitcoin every time you drive to the store.
Like if you put on your heated seats, or if you put on your, like it's just kicking on these ASICs to generate the heat, and then it, directs it to wherever it needs to go.
We can make them really efficient at like generate or crunching Bitcoin and generating a ton of heat really fast. We could totally make Bitcoin air fryers. Cook you some dinner, and while that's running for 20 minutes, you're freaking working the blockchain too, baby.
You could bake your own Bitcoin pizza.
Hell yes, this needs to be a thing. Bitcoin pizza ovens, dude.
I
You heard
don't
it
know if
here
it get,
first.
I don't know
You
if
heard
it's
it
gonna
here.
get that hot, because like, I
If
mean, it
you
works
work it
good for
hard
like a
enough, it
pool.
will.
It works good for like a pool to get to like 80, 90 degrees in
Okay, but
that.
think about that though. You've got all it. Okay, so the
If you
amount of
did some
heat
kind
that
of
you
immersion cooling, like say if you had it in like a mineral oil, and then you had water pumped through that,
if you had a
which people
massive heat
do.
sink that was running like a circulated basically
But
cooling
like
system through
microwaves and
that,
ovens are getting like what you need 400 degrees. Like that's
yeah,
a lot of heat.
right. But the amount of heat that you put out is in relation to the amount of surface area. So if you're running that through a small coil, that coil is going to get really hot. So if you're normally diffusing that over a huge area, all you have to do is concentrate that heat into a small area. And now instead of putting it into a bunch of fins on a heat sink, we're putting it in the coils to cook a pizza. I know it's doable. It's just down the math.
That would be crazy.
I know,
I
right?
just don't know if it's gonna get that, like how many you would have to run, like
Oh,
because
dude. Well, if I'm only going to run it at 20 minutes at a time, man, shit. How many people are going to drop the money to have like four miners running at one time so they can cook a pizza in 20 minutes and just that's the whole time those things are running. Some
Well,
layup will
here's
buy
the
it.
other piece of it too, right? Like when you're talking about hooking up the miners, you're in your head you're thinking like, okay, an actual physical miner attached to your oven, right? But like if you really take apart the chassis of it and you take away a lot of the cooling stuff, you're really left with a bunch of boards, right, which are flat, and then you can really sort of like arrange them around the oven without seriously increasing the size of the oven, in just like in a different format, right? And then you don't need all the cooling, you don't need the fans, you don't need any of that, because you're redirecting all of that
Well,
in a different
think
way.
about it. We design miners to actually cool as efficiently as possible so we don't burn the boards out. All you're doing is you're redesigning the cooling system. So instead of air cooling it as efficiently as you can, you would be basically running some sort of a heat transfer, probably, just some sort of coolant coils, and transferring as you're actually trying to concentrate the heat, but transfer it to where you want it. So it's just re engineering. It's all there. It's just we'd have to reinvent the miner in a way.
Well, like the immersion guys are onto that stuff. Like that's the most.
Oh my God, Bitcoin miner sous vide machine, a sous vide circulator. Those only have to get up to about 150, 160 degrees. That's totally doable.
Yeah, none of this is doable until we get a constant cheap supply of ASICs chips, and that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, that's probably a good
At
point.
least not efficiently. Yeah, at least not efficiently.
Well, one can dream. We're going to have a home appliances company that's just going to specialize in creating all these home appliances that we're using that have little mini ASICs in them, and that we're going to
Well,
be able
I
to
think
kind of subsidize the energy usage and kind of get a better return for our energy usage with
I mean,
these.
I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
if Block is really going to do what I think what Intel was originally trying to do, which was, be able to integrate ASIC circuits into everyday appliances and other things, I think there's legs to that, right? Like, it's just a matter of them, re-engineering, like Renegade said, re-engineering the cooling system, right? And rather than it being dissipating heat, into the atmosphere, it's concentrating the heat into a specific application.
yeah,
Instead of treating it as a waste product, we actually treat it as well. It's similar to what Satoshi was talking about. He's actually using it for an application, but that's also you're taking basically a byproduct. You're not trying to make that into an efficient use for the heat. If your heat is either your primary goal or equally a goal to mining, you could definitely find a way to harness that better.
That's actually a good point, right? If you sort of look at it, the framework where, heating is no longer the byproduct, but maybe even like Bitcoin is the byproduct, right? And heating is your main goal. Because, like, at the end of the day, right, you're talking about applying this into, like, let's call, like, think about, like, let's just, apply to every single appliance that requires some sort of heat in your home, or, creating some sort of, like, heat process. Like, all of these things, there's so many of them. You don't need Bitcoin to be like the main product. Like, that can just be a byproduct, and it doesn't need to be 100% efficient in getting that, and still maintaining a lot of value.
yeah.
Well, yeah, it's about priorities. I mean, shit, you can still mine Bitcoin with a GPU. It's just you're going to produce more heat than you will Bitcoin. But if that's your goal, then so be it. As long hell, you could have somebody who just has a lottery miner that it's also a heated blanket. Here you go, Grandma. You can mine some Bitcoin while you keep your lap warm in the winter.
I see the roadblock as being these large public miners, because they just keep chewing up the newer chips, because all they do is another fucking capital raising, write shit off, operate with huge amounts of debt. So until we either shake these guys out, or they make chips not available to them, so a company comes up and says, yeah, these aren't for like ASIC miners per se, then I can't see us getting hold of chips anytime soon, eh?
Again, I don't really want like chip shortages, right? So it's like I want those guys. Whoever wants to order some kind of ASIC should just have it readily and available. Like we should have, lots of competition flooding in the space. We should have a lot more manufacturing going on. Another issue is that there's a shortage of engineers who can develop these chips as well. A lot of those people are overseas too. So, and I know that these countries don't want their talent plucked and brought over to the United States as well. So. But yeah, I mean, it's just capitalism, right? If there's a demand for it, someone's going to fill it at some point. We just kind of got to get through the beginning stages when everything's kind of like low and everyone's kind of trying to catch up to the demand. But we'll get there at some point.
Well, we're seeing the crunch of it. It's been centralized. It's been what, 1, 2 companies that have been producing these chips. So we, of course, when they're under a crunch, we're going to feel it. We're all going to feel it. So maybe we need to focus less on the idea of can't wait till there's more ASIC chips. Maybe we need to look at alternatives. We need to diversify, decentralize. We need more guys generating these technologies and finding ways to solve these problems without relying on one chip manufacturer to be the golden standard.
Well, this is an issue beyond just ASIC chips, right? Like, ultimately, worldwide, there's really only I want to say like two, maybe I think like two chip manufacturers, really, right? Like the main one is TSMC, and then even then, like for those guys, for all those chip manufacturers, like what what their like all of their source parts are coming from is just like I think there's just like one company that's really making all of this stuff. So it's really coming down to one company at the end of the day, and so that's a bigger problem, especially in as the world moves forward and chips become more and more obviously important in our lives, everyday lives. It's just going to become a bigger problem.
Yeah, I think the US has started on that though. They've started the chip war, haven't they? Bringing the Taiwan companies here and throwing millions of dollars building those plants in Texas and what have you. So the US government's doing something right on that regard, but I don't think they want the chips for fucking mining Bitcoin. They just want to build more missiles and fucking planes.
Sounds like a golden entrepreneurial activity for somebody who wants to end up on a hit list.
Yeah. Mate, you imagine the fucking politics behind that, man.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's got to be worse than the oil.
Dude, I mean, the US government's spending fucking shitloads. When they sent Nancy Pelosi over to fucking Taiwan. And then they were on, what's she doing there? What's she doing there? And that's when they came out, like a week or two after she got back, they came out with that chip fucking bill. So yeah, she was over there lining up all the ducks.
She was probably over there playing the stock market and trying to figure out what she should fucking short next.
I think the good news is the United States has recognized that there's a problem here, that there's a complete shortage around the world of chip manufacturers, and I think this is a golden opportunity. And plus, I think we also realize that it's important that we do get some chip manufacturers here in the States. That way, that if China does invade Taiwan or decides that they don't want to play ball with us anymore, that our freaking society would be completely ruined because we no longer have access to chips. And so I think it's just going to be a race from here on out, and we're maybe not hearing much about it just because people are busy, like setting the foundation and trying to get these foundries or whatever they are called. They're called built up, and that probably just takes time. But as long as we got capital and we got talent in this country, and we've got demand, and so when you have all three of those things, it's just a matter of time before that demand gets met with supply.
Right. What I can't help but think is how much old tech is sitting around just rotting that is not necessarily efficient by today's standards at all. But there are literally warehouses. There are huge freaking piles of old computers just laying around that are still functional. They're just outdated. There's got to be a market for somebody to be able to take apart some of these, at least take the better components, make not efficient, not compact, not small little miners, but big miners that do the job of a little ASIC. Something the size of your average residential refrigerator. And I can tell you right now, if you can make the price point right, especially during a shortage, there are guys that have an old barn or a couple old warehouses or some extra space. They don't mind letting a few of those sit there and run. And guess what? Because you spread it out, it's actually going to be less of a heat issue because there's more surface area. So, yeah, we may have a crunch, we may have a shortage, but we have a lot of old shit we're not using, and we just feel like we've come too far and we're too good to use it.
Well, one of the issues though around that is like ASICs were like purpose built, right? Because like it's not so much, you can't just, chips aren't just like generic things, right? So like the way the sort of each of the, if you kind of like zoom in on a chip, take it apart, look on the insides, how the metal connects from one piece to another, like all of that matters at like a nanometer sort of like
Oh, absolutely.
Size, right? So like when we have like old inefficient chips and things like that, right? Like those are inefficient at like a nanometer sort of level, and so those differences today are absolutely massive to the point where like you really can't use it for that. Like no matter how many, say we'll call it like old GPUs that you have lying around, right? It's just no matter how many you string together, it's just not going to rival a current generation ASIC. It just doesn't work.
You definitely are not. You're not going to reach that same level of efficiency, and there are limits to it or whatnot. But if you had enough space, you could get close to what we're doing now if you ran enough shit in parallel. But I do believe somebody very smart would have to sit down and find efficient ways to make this old shit work together. And it may not even be like, let's just slap a bunch of boards together into this Frankenstein. It may be literally we're pulling chips off of boards and finding ways to repurpose them. There are ways to do it. It's not the best way. It's definitely not the best way. But
No, I honestly I don't think so. I don't think so because it's not a quantity issue, right? Like you can't just say like, oh, okay, so like okay, one ASIC miner, can do 100 terahashes, and then let's say one GPU can do 1 terahash. It's not a matter of stringing together 100 GPUs equals one miner. Like it's not, the math doesn't work that way, right?
Right.
Because there's physical limitations, right? Where like this chip, the only way to make this work, you would have to open up the chip, rewire the chip, which is obviously not a feasible thing to do, right? Like this doesn't happen. Like you're not doing that. The only real sort of like true way to do this would be take it apart, pull out all the individual bits and reclaim it and recreate, like melt down the metal and recreate,
recycling the entire chip,
recycling the entire thing, right? And so like at that point,
but still at that point you're just manufacturing chips. Yeah, I get
exactly. So at that point it's cheaper just to mine new product, which is why ultimately there is, warehouses and landfills full of this old tech, because it's not cost effective to do it.
Right. Which, and trust me, I'm not sitting here playing the green card here and the poor whales, the sea turtles, but it does suck that we literally have like mountains of this old tech laying around, and we haven't figured out a way to actually utilize it for anything useful. It just sits and rots.
I think it's unfortunate. I mean, actually, on sort of a different thing, I mean, it doesn't have to do with Bitcoin, but like back in the day, we used to take, I used to work for a nonprofit where we would take a lot of old computers and old chips and everything like that from companies that are just like, businesses would recycle them and stuff. And you would take apart, right, all the different components and everything like that. You'd flash them all and put them back together and then sell them or donate them to schools and things like that, right, who could use these lower powered machines. So stuff like that is possible in terms of like recycling and upcycling a lot of the old tech. But in terms of trying to get that stuff to do the most modern thing, like one of those is, it's not going to power AI, for example, right? Like you can do word processing, but it just doesn't have the capabilities to.
Here's an analogy. If you got an old wire wound ballast out of a fluorescent light, back when they used to use solid copper wound ballasts, and then you went and got a warehouse full of them and said, I'm going to try and repurpose this, you just can't, because you cannot compete with the cost and the efficiency of a solid state ballast and a fluoro. I mean, they're a quarter of the size, a tenth of the weight, maybe a 20th of the weight, and they don't produce any heat, and they don't produce, and they don't burn out like traditional ballasts used to.
Oh, definitely. Until you can't get the solid state ballasts anymore, and then you start going, how can we use this old shit? That's the only place my mind goes. I know it's not efficient. I know that, but it is a shame that we can't find a way to at least put some of it to use. Hell, like I said, as we're sitting here talking, I'm taking a 10-year-old laptop with a gig of RAM and attempting to download the blockchain on it just because I can.
Well, I was going to say that was the other thing, right? Like, because that's where I'm running my node on a computer that I built years and years, like decades ago, right? Like, so it's obviously been like somewhat updated as I go along, but I would say the newest part in that thing is probably a good 10 years old, right? And so running, you can run some simple stuff. You can still run a Bitcoin node on it.
I bet you could run a Nostr relay on just about anything that would normally be considered unusable today.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah,
like if you can run Umbrel, I can't see why not.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way to utilize some of that shit. How many old tablets and just old laptops and bullshit are just laying around that could totally jump on Wi-Fi right now? And every person could probably have one or two freaking Nostr relays running in their house, but they don't. Imagine the scalability of things if we started utilizing some of those old tech for some of this stuff we've got going on that's not super processor intensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those things, right? That I was led there a lot because of, wanting to run a node and then looking at the prices of Raspberry Pis that are just absolutely through the roof. You can easily buy a used cheap laptop, 5 years old, no problem. Like, and you can run multiple nodes on that one device. You just put a virtual machine on it, and yeah, it's more than capable.
Yeah, and then if
Raspberry
you've got,
Pis are overpriced junk. I wish I'd never bought one. I'd much rather have a mini PC or something like that running my node right now.
I
I actually have an
I
I have
take
an
offense.
Amazon. Go ahead, Babel.
I take offense to that fiend. I've got a Raspberry Pi and it runs fucking sweet.
Well, you got luckier. You got luckier than I did, man. I deleted all my
I
apps
think
off Umbro, and
I
I
just want
still
to
have.
put it out there,
I
fiend.
got 12 days, and I had to hit a reset.
I could be fucking user error. I mean, let's boil it down. I mean,
Oh, shots fired.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
for all
ask
the people
questions.
that
I'm
are
like,
running,
what can I do? And so people, people are like, well, I don't know. And it's like, well, is your Umbro updated to the latest version?
I mean,
Yeah.
for
Right.
fuck's sake, mate, you still run a turntable, so I don't think you've moved out of the fucking pedal. How the fuck are you capable of running an Umbro?
Hey, it's
For
better
fuck's
than a
sake.
cassette machine, man, or an 8-track player.
That's great.
You
Well, I
got
was
an
gonna
8-track in your
say,
car as well, have you?
What's that?
I said you got an 8-track in your car as well, have you?
My cousin does actually. He's got like an old '78 Corvette, I think it is, and he's got he comes with the 8-track player, and he went on eBay and bought a bunch of 8-tracks just to keep it vintage.
Can you
he's
still
not going
get
to
them?
spoil his audio experience with an 8-track. He still runs vinyl in his car. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I hope you don't go over any speed bumps.
Shit. Oh yeah, I've looked at the Raspberry Pis. I've been thinking about picking one up just for fiddling, and they're so hard to get. Even Shamey was talking about that earlier. Like,
You want mine?
even though they're a UK company, he can't source them. You can't find them because there's such a shortage.
No,
But I'm over here.
it's not worth it.
I've got a
Okay, I'll
tab
give
right
you-
now.
I'll give you mine. It crashes every 12 days, and I have to manually restart it every 12 days to it crashes. You can have mine.
So I've got an Amazon tab open right now, and I'm staring at an old Lenovo Mini. It's one of the slim PCs, right? But it's got a freaking Intel quad core processor, 16 gigs of RAM, 2 terabyte hard drive, and Wi-Fi and all the fun shit. 95 fucking bucks. I could dump Umbrel on that and be up and running with the blockchain downloaded in fucking 2 days.
Yeah.
For $95. I can't even buy the Raspberry Pi minus the freaking the box to put it in, much less get it all connected and set up for that. Not even close.
No, it's running like $300 right now, and that's without hard drives, which is crazy. Like, the whole point of the Raspberry Pi, like when it first came out, was like, at the end of the day, it's just an underpowered computer, right? And it was supposed to be for like little projects, and they were supposed to, I think I bought mine years and years and years and years ago for like, I want to say like $60 or something like that. And that was the whole point of it, was like the price point was so low that you could tinker around and mess around with it. But now it's at the price point where you could buy a whole freaking laptop for cheaper. So why would you? Like, you're better
Have you
off.
looked at any of the Orange Pi type stuff? I've been looking at it a little bit. Most of those are actually still pretty affordable. There's some that compete with the Raspberry Pi. I don't know that they will necessarily just take all the Raspberry Pi software, but they'll run Linux, so you'll be fine with Umbro. And they've actually got one. It's probably the most expensive that they came out with, but basically it's a full computer built into a keyboard. And if you want to spend the money for like $300, you can get basically a fully functional computer, a monitor, obviously a keyboard because it's built into it, and a mouse and all the shit you need, and like a webcam for like under $300. It's super interesting. But yeah, they have them on Amazon. It's Orange Pi.
Yeah, interesting.
I've been looking at them. It's like there's a lot of these little alternatives to Raspberry Pi pop up, because if you think about it, it's not that complicated. It's just a single board computer. So there's a lot of them out there, but they've done a really good job of kind of cornering the market. Everybody thinks Raspberry Pi when you think of like a deck of playing card sized computer.
Yeah, my only question with an Orange Pi would be like, how are the, because so I make custom keyboards, and I'm big into hardware and everything like that. I've got to imagine like you're going to have some heat issues with an Orange Pi, and then like just you've got very proprietary.
Orange Pi has a bunch of small computers that are basically like Raspberry Pi knockoffs. Essentially, they're kind of their spin on it. But they came out with a in-keyboard computer, and it's a little thicker on the back end. You can tell it has some ventilation. That's their expensive model I've been looking at, but they actually have Raspberry Pi competitors that are just little single board computers. They kind of fill that niche too. So that's where I started looking, and then I was like, "What is this?" So it's like their new thing they're kind of going into, and I think they're marketing more towards that laptop crowd that they want a compact computer, but they don't want to have a whole stand up freaking tower sitting there next to their, it's for grandma, that kind of thing, small computing, web browsing, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like at this point, honestly, like I would recommend, even like a Mac Mini sort of thing, like for roughly the same price, right? We're talking like under 500, right? If you're talking about just regular computing, there's a lot. I think there's better options. Something like that, like a keyboard built-in sort of thing, like that's often very gimmicky, and unfortunately, like the keyboard components of it takes up like such a significant amount of space that if you're gonna put like a usable computer into it, you're just going to take up just way too much space, or you're not going to have like proper cooling.
It's not going to do any kind of major processing power. Trust me, that's not something I bet the most complicated that thing, or the most like resource heavy thing that setup could do would be like play Netflix, and it's probably still going to get hot as shit while you're doing it.
Yeah, look, like buy a Chromebook or something, right? Like something like that. It could probably do just as much for cheaper.
Chromebook, like you're neutered. That's the only big thing that really kind of sticks out to me with the Orange Pi type stuff is you could run your own whatever Linux distro you wanted to on it. You have to like kind of hack a Chromebook to get in there and do that. You got to know what you're doing. Chrome, a lot of people that I've talked to have issues with just common shit that I do online. Like, for whatever reason, Chromebook is worse than like Chrome on an Android. You just can't always access every website. It's kind of like the base minimum. Like, you can get on and check your email, but good luck with a lot of other shit. It's flip a coin.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the apps aren't going to work and stuff. Like, you just have to run everything through the browser, basically.
Mini PCs are the way to go if you're going to run Lightning and Bitcoin Node along with like a Nostr Relay and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely.
I had somebody on Telegram the other day they're running a Chromebook and they can't actually use Nostr Nests. Like, for some reason, Nostr Nests just doesn't work with Chromebook. I'm like, it works fine on Chromium, but try as they might, they cannot get it to work. There's just some issue.
Start9 offers a mini PC that they for sale on their website. Now you can get better specs than that on Amazon. That they're offering.
Start9's good shit.
Same or better. It is
expensive. They're expensive.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Shit, you're paying for the software and the support.
What I'm saying is that the software's free, right? So you can buy a mini PC on Amazon with like basically the exact same specs, if not better, for a third of the price, and then install Embassy OS.
I've met the Start9 guys personally. I know them. I'm friends with people who are like really close to them, and I'm all for it. I'm all for if somebody wants to jump into it and utilize them. It's a great resource for somebody who's not really technical or just doesn't want to fuck with it, or if you have the money. But myself, for one, I'm a tinkerer. I like to play, and I ain't got that kind of expendable resource on the. I would rather set up 3 Umbrals for the price of one Start9, and not have all the flashy Start9 software. Then go that route. That's just me.
Well, the software's free though. You can flash.
You can, yes, you can. You can just get the software and dump it on a Raspberry Pi. You're right. Yeah.
Where they're making their money is through the mini PC, and I mean, I hate to say this because I'm hurting their business, but you can buy the same damn mini PC, if not better, for a third of the price that they're selling for.
I agree.
That's flash Embassy OS on it.
Yep.
Right.
Well, part of the value add though is that like when you buy it through them, it's all pre-installed, everything's ready to go. You plug it in and you're good to go, right? And so like there's a lot of value in that for a lot of people who aren't tinkerers or who don't understand, who've never set up a computer before in their life, have never done any of that. They don't know specs, they don't know what to look for. They just want something that just works, right? And so that's the value add.
Or if I've got a shitload of
another thing though too.
I really just like to set up a third Bitcoin node. And at this point, it's like money is not as much of an object for me. I can totally see that. Yeah, I just want something I can plug in and go because I don't have time. I'm busy doing other shit. So there's a market, and I'm all for it. But it ain't me. But
here's another thing, though, too, with Start9. I watched the BTC Sessions YouTube, and he actually had to build his. They just sent him the parts, and he had to actually build it himself. And so it's
did he really?
Yeah, they have that option.
It was a cheaper node. Yeah, kits.
They have kits. And they have fully finished models. They've got the full shebang. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if the kit was like $500 or something like that, but yeah, he had to actually build the damn thing. And so at that point, then
Yeah.
you're not really, you know,
If you're going
I
to
guess
have to
the
build it,
only
you may
thing,
as
the
well
only
just
redeeming
get a
factor would be like customer service, maybe,
right.
like if maybe you have like premium service, or you can call them at any time or something to that
a
effect.
warranty if it breaks, right, or something.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
will say from the people that I've talked to, Start9 is really good on their customer service side. So which is great because with Umbrel you've got a huge community of open source people to kind of lean on, and you'll probably figure it out, but you're going to have to get in there and think. The Start9 guys will probably hold your hand. So that, I mean, it's definitely one of those you're going to pay for the user experience.
Do you guys see that we have stable coins on Bitcoin again?
Ah, fuck that shit.
A BRC20. There's a new company or stablecoin called Stably. Can someone explain to me how BRC20 works? I know it's like ERC20, but you can't take that over to Lightning, right? Like this is all just layer one token shit, right? Or is there some way
I'm
you
not
can move?
100% sure. I think it's its own. I think it's its own layer two on the blockchain, sort of like Lightning is a layer two. I think it's a separate version of a layer two, but that I may be completely wrong on that.
Oh
That's
yeah,
kind of
to
weird
create them,
history
it's the
I've
same way. It's the same way as ordinals. To create them as layer one. But my question is that and it costs money to and transact on layer one to mint them. But my question is if can you actually move them onto a layer two so you can actually transact cheaply like you would through a Lightning network? Because why in the living we've already done stable coins on Bitcoin with USDT back in the day, and they moved off of Bitcoin because it's just too freaking expensive to transact. And so they moved to like Tron, I think was one, because it's obviously clearly centralized and they can keep the transaction fees low. And I think Ethereum was the other, where they
Great,
split.
great. You just put the idea out there on a podcast. So next thing you know, we're going to be seeing Lightnings. Somebody's going
Well,
to build it.
fortunately, there's nobody here in the audience other than just the co-host. So as long as
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
I'm
know,
sure one of two things is going to happen. Either people who are fucking around with the idea of monkey JPEGs on the blockchain are going to get tired of paying the big fees and run out of money, or they're going to see enough use case, which is entirely possible, that somebody's going to put the resources and time into building an efficient sort of Lightning or Liquid-like layer two solution to move things around without having to pay fees. So I can see it happening, but I don't think it's quite there yet. I bet you somebody's working on it though.
I don't think it's going to happen only because, number one, if you look at how long it took for Lightning to get to where it is today, that took quite a lot of time and a lot of brain power and a lot of like real sort of development to get to this point. And if you look at what BRC20 and the ordinals and all that sort of stuff is, like, yeah, so creating it did take, was created with with a lot of intelligence and a lot of stuff, but it's extremely inefficient. And ultimately, the users that are using these products are the same type of people who are buying monkey JPEGs. They are not the type of people who are going to put real investment and real time and real development into things. You literally see what happened on stage, right? You've got dudes cosplaying in wizard robes versus people that are like actually doing real development. So ultimately, the kids are going to get bored, and they're not going to look for the most efficient way to transact properly. That's not their goal at all.
yeah, and I mean with these stable coins, as long, assuming they're only be able to transact on layer one, then it's like okay, you have move $80 of stable coins on Bitcoin, you have to pay a $30 transaction fee. Like that's not going to work. So it's just like, what's the point here? Why? There's a
They're more
reason why
worried about efficiency than
stable
use
coins
case.
moved off the main chain in the first place. Like, why are you bringing it back unless you have like a plan to make the
Right.
transaction fees like basically next to nothing, like you would on Lightning Network? That's what I was asking because it's
If they
just
were worried
obviously,
about efficiency, they wouldn't be trying to inscribe shit and paying money to try to inscribe shit onto something you can right click save. Let's be honest. Honestly, and I don't hate on anybody who's trying to do this shit. I think Bitcoin is for the world, and people can do what they want with it. And if they want to pay the fees, you know what? People out there who are actually running miners, they're profiting on it. That's great. It sucks when it's a bunch of bullshit going on that's not really anything useful. But you know what? It's not my money. It's not my business. So I'm okay with that. However, these idiots are out here trying to do a bunch of dumb crap that's not sustainable. And that's really what it comes down to is long term, are we going to have to worry about this? Are these guys going to be paying the same fees we're paying for a long time to keep scribbling a little bit of code into the back end of a picture? No, I don't think so. It's not the best use case for it, and it's evolutionary. You know, in time, it'll just kind of go away. It has to.
Right. It's like one of those things. Like if you're already using stable coins, you're probably sitting in the global south or whatever, and you're kind of scraping by, and you just want to keep your money in something that doesn't completely inflate away on you, and so you're not going to want to transact 30% of your wealth away every time you make a transaction through these stable coins. And so at that point, as well as like when you're a stable coin holder, like you're obviously still using a centralized currency to begin with, because that's what the US dollar is. It's like, why do you give a shit whether it's on Bitcoin or Tron anyways? Like Tron's clearly a centralized network. All you care about at this point is the fact that you can move some token representation of a dollar from one person to another with like a fraction of a penny of transaction cost, right? So I just don't understand why people think this is a good idea or to do this on Bitcoin. And so it just clearly to me seems like this is just some kind of like scammy rug pull where people are going to load up their treasury and they're just going to rug and walk away.
Or maybe they're getting tired of getting rugged on every other freaking blockchain, so they went back to the old standard that's not going to go anywhere. They want to keep playing their games, and they just haven't grown up enough to realize that it's a waste of fucking time and resources.
I think there's going to be there's a natural Darwinism that's sort of like built into all this, right? Like it's fine to play around, you can do whatever you want, you can mess around on it, but at the end of the day, like the value right now, it's because the costs are so low, because the number of people globally that are using Bitcoin are so low that it's fine that you can pay, whatever fees that are there. But as a real true adoption grows, as like actual true use case continues to propagate, you're going to find that the fees are going to go up, and that's just how it is. Like that's what's going to happen. Fees are going to go up. Let's just say like everybody in the world starts to use it, right? The fees are going to go significantly higher than what they are now today. It'll get to the point where messing around and screwing around just isn't profitable, or not just profitable, it just isn't viable, right? And even then, you might have some, billionaire sort of like rich kids that still want to play, and that'll happen. You do have kids that crash Ferraris because it's fun for them. So like that stuff will still happen, but you're just going to see less and less of it. And so right now, it's fun for what income level does it require to be able to mess around and do ordinals and scribe. It's obviously like global south, people aren't doing that because they just simply can't afford it. And so you take that and scale it up, right? Like at the end of the day, maybe billionaire kids are still going to be inscribing ordinals and doing goofy stuff like that, but 90% of the world are just going to be using it for the real use case. So I have no issues with people doing it right now, because at the end of the day, like people are people, and they're going to play when they can play. But and it just kind of proves that, look, the system still works, but it clears itself out, right? It's got a system of like of cleaning itself up as it scales up.
Well, and even
it's evolutionary. Sorry, it's like I said, there's natural pressure there, so it just the mathematics itself makes it evident it's going to happen. And I'm not going to say we're out of the woods yet. We're not going to see more of it, but I think at least for the recent shit, I feel like we're over the hump with the ordinal shit. It's slowed down. There's way less talk and everything about it, because I guarantee you these guys have gone through a fortune in fees just to even dick around with it.
Well, you say that, and I'm looking at the mempool right now. Still 54 sats per VBot.
Yeah. I'm seeing 44. Medium, high priority 48.
Yeah, but I think you have to look at it from like a averages sort of perspective, right? Because like at some point, I would say like a couple of weeks back, right, we were talking like we're like 300 or something crazy like that.
I seen it at 550, eh?
Yeah, I'm not saying we're over it at all. I think we're just kind of on the downslope. Like I think it was a big fad that came through, and I'm not saying we won't see more spikes of it, but we're seeing it slow down. And I think the longer it goes on, the more it will. But here's the other side: is while those fees are that high, because these guys are dicking around, somebody's profiting. So while it sucks for the average person just trying to move their money around. They're also building the Bitcoin economy at the same time. Maybe not in a useful way, maybe not in a way that benefits them in the long run, but they're still building the Bitcoin economy, and they're injecting more money into that ecosystem that wasn't there before.
Another thing, just to touch on the stablecoin thing again. A bit it's like the world you were kind of envisioning. I think that we're all envisioning in the future, where usage and global adoption does start to really ramp up, and fees do start to jump. And at that point, the value of the U.S. dollar, as far as global reserve asset and something that people want to hold, is going to weaken as well, which even hurts the case for this stupid stable coin. So it just seems like a really dumb idea. And I know that we got like Taro coming out on Lightning Network as well, and so it's just like, why would you create something on main chain when we already know that there's going to be stable coins here soon with the Lightning Network?
Well, it's funny because, stable coins, the terminology makes it sound like, the value's not fluctuating, but let's put it into the context of what you're talking about here, right? What you're talking about essentially like hyper Bitcoinization, right? Where Bitcoin is a global standard, where there is significant usage across the world. If you look at what's really stable, is the US dollar the one that's the more stable coin, or is Bitcoin going to be the one with the more stable value, right? At the end of the day, it's funny because, if you do peg, essentially stable coin is really just pegging something to the US dollar. So if you're now saying that, okay, we're in a world of Bitcoinization, in order to get there, really ultimately it requires the US dollar to be hyperinflationary on the opposite side of the coin, right? Or opposite side. So like, any stable coin that you create is going to inherently be unstable.
It's an
Right.
inflation
Yeah.
coin. It's not a stable coin. It's an inflation coin. You've taken a deflationary currency and you've pegged it to an inflationary currency, which is why people will do it, because that's where the value proposition is. They know that if we peg it to this price, as time goes on, what your money is worth degrades, and what we get to keep in Bitcoin grows. Right? That's their cut.
The volatility will be the U.S. dollar, right? Maybe the volatility
Yeah,
always has been the U.S. dollar. Who
it
knows?
always has been. We're just taught to think in USD.
Well,
It's when you
it
switch to
goes
the
back.
Bitcoin standard,
It
it's a whole
always has
different
been.
ballgame.
Look at you take the example, right, where I always go back to this. Imagine like you're in a car and you're parked in a parking lot, right, with all the cars around you, and you back up your car slowly and you look out the window only at the car next to you, right? That car looks like it's moving forward, but you're actually moving backwards. Everybody else is standing still. Who's really volatile? It's the car that's moving, right? That's the one that's volatile. That's the U.S. dollar inflating. So
Right. It's kind of one of those things that everyone assumes that Bitcoin's the volatile asset because it was kind of came second, right? And U.S. dollar was here first, and so that's what's being based
exactly.
off of. But if we base it off of Bitcoin, we'd be like, well, the U.S. dollar is the volatile
Well,
asset
yeah,
here.
if you
It's
think
all
about
about
it,
perspective.
if you spin up a stable
Perception,
coin,
right? Theory
if
of
you spin up
relativity, right?
if you spin up an air quote stable coin and you pin it to an inflationary asset like that, it's like a winning game. If you think about it, as long as you don't play something stupid and get FTX'd, you're going to make money no matter what you do, because it's a moving target. You know that where you're pegging that value is going to continually decrease at least this much per year, and more if they get stupid. So the more money the U.S. dollar print or the U.S. economy prints, the more money you make when you're pegged against an asset like Bitcoin, or when you're backed by an asset like Bitcoin, I should say.
Bitish, did you have any talking points? I thought you had DM'd me that you might have some things that you were gonna want to talk about tonight.
I did, and then I lost track of time, and I'm out in the car with the kids, and I don't have any of those notes with me. So,
Oh, no
uh,
problem.
I'll be back probably another 15 minutes or so, not even 5 minutes, something like that. So,
All right, cool.
but I did want to talk about something Nostr related, and and it was actually, unfortunately, Puzzle is gone, but it was something that he had posted. It goes back to the whole likes versus Zaps sort of controversy. I saw that Will had posted something, and it sort of brought the whole thing back again about would you rather have 21 Zaps or 120 likes, right? And I think Renegade, you had a really good thread
Yeah, he
with Fiend. I think it was
Frankenstein that
you
whole thing
guys
back
talking
up.
about.
He brought that back from the dead. Yeah, he did. There was some good debate that day, though. I think it was yesterday morning. There was some really good debate going on.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about it for sure, I mean, I'm definitely on the side of Renegade. I'm not just an only Zaps kind of guy. I think you can have different tiers on how to engage with people, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And obviously, like a reply is a tier where it's kind of like maybe someone's post has garnered a little bit more interest to you. Do you feel the need to engage with them, verbally or at least through typing? And then like a like could kind of be like a read receipt, right? Like it'd be like, I read your note, I agree with your note, but maybe you didn't like, maybe it's something I already knew or something like that, and you didn't provide any new value to me or something like that. But I agree with you, and I want to show my support of being in agreement of your note, and so I give you a like. But then like maybe like if you posted something kind of a mind blowing concept that really, like we were just kind of talking about, like, Bitcoin, is Bitcoin volatile or is US dollar volatile? Kind of like maybe a subject like that. And I'm like, oh, maybe I never thought of it that way. Maybe I really like that. And that kind of gave me some value and perspective or whatever that I'd never had before. And maybe I'll zap you, a couple hundred sats or whatever. And so kind of maybe that's like a love or something like that instead of just like a like or just kind of a read receipt or whatever. And then you also have like the repost or the renote or whatever you want to call it, where it's like, it's kind of even a different level of engagement too, where it's like, yeah, I really like what this person's saying. I want to share it out with the rest of my people on my feed as well. And so, like, I don't know. It just seems like, and another thing I think it was you, Renegade, was saying, like, when you like somebody's note, then that shows up on your notifications, and you have an opportunity at that point now to be able to follow that person, whereas maybe you didn't even know they existed on the Nosterverse.
Right.
And
I get a lot
so,
of likes from people that
yeah,
I had no idea followed my stuff and I've never seen. And maybe they don't have the spendable money to sit there and zap every note that they see. I know I don't. I know I got to be a little bit picky unless it's a zapathon about who I'm zapping, how much I zap, and I try to make sure my zaps count and they're in line with the value I get from somebody else. But at the same time, I feel like there is a use. I see it. I see it actually happening as somebody who does content creation. There is a use for when you're scrolling down your feed and you see something and you go, hey, I like that guy's shit, but I don't have the money to send him a zap. Or that's not enough for me to actually pay him, but I'd like him to know I saw it. And that's cool. And I want to give him my support. It's similar to the concept of when you're in person, you're walking along and you see somebody, whether you know them or not, and you smile or you wave. It's those small social niceties. That's kind of what that's become. And I know that people get very emotional about this because we're all living in a world where we have been manipulated by social media in one way or another. We came from a place where the like became a part of an algorithm and it became a way to manipulate our experience. And everybody, even still now on YouTube, I'm like, hey, go like and follow my stuff because it helps me build up in the ranks so people follow my shit. That's the game we've had to play. We forget that we come over to Nostr and here we are in this world. And like doesn't have any meaning. It has no algorithmic value. It has no, you don't gain anything necessarily
from client side, but I still argue user side there's value, right?
Right,
That's the whole
exactly.
point.
So that's what it comes down to is what is value? Do we have to quantify every value and everything that we experience monetarily? And that's, I think, where it really gets people. And I especially see it get the ladies because it's more of an emotional thing, and I totally understand it. But not all value to a human being is monetary. Not everything has to be equated to a sat value. So when somebody likes my stuff, I get value out of that. I enjoy it. It makes me smile. I go, oh, cool. I like. It's not even the ego boost of I log in and I see, oh, look, I've got 40 likes and I'm like quantifying it in my head. But I'll actually see the individual and I'll be like, oh, look, Sarah liked my stuff. That's cool. I'm glad she saw that. It's just a little acknowledgement, and those things do have an impact. It also gives you, as somebody if you're trying to do content, if you're actually trying to do it intentionally and you're trying to put stuff out that people are going to enjoy and you're trying to educate and teach other people, you want to get some feedback on what is resonating with people and what isn't. Not everybody is going to zap. That's a reality we're going to have to face. Not everybody is going to spend money on your content, but I would like to know what people are vibing with and what they aren't. And while I understand that a comment or a renote or something like that is much more valuable than a like still has some value to me. It's like the minimal baseline of what we're used to in social media. And like it or not, we become so used to it, we understand it. What kind of gets me, and I sit back, I love a zap. I'm not pro like and anti zap by any means. I absolutely love it, and I zap the shit out of people too. But people get so emotional about it, especially the folks who are so vehemently only zaps. And I cracks me up because even in Will's thread, the names I saw getting thrown around, I saw somebody called a charlatan just because they had a different opinion. I got called a Fiat Maxi by somebody that I actually usually get along with and have some respect for. I'm like, what's that even mean? You know? But I think everybody just has to kind of take a chill pill a little bit about it. It's entertaining, but at the same time, people take it way too seriously.
And if you break it down to its foundation, like what are we here for? Like we're here for engagement. Like we're on social media to engage with people. And so yeah, you're right. While a like is minimal levels of engagement, I'm just clicking one button and I'm not giving you monetary value for it. It is some kind of engagement.
Better than ignoring it. It's better than
scrolling
past it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think you have to look at them as like two different things, right? Because they're ultimately, for lack of a better term, they're different social currencies.
Agreed.
When you look at like zaps, right? Each person has the ability to infinitely zap as much as as high as they want. But how much signal is that really in terms of how much is your content worth, right? So, for example, you look at like some of the guys like JP and Frog and Marriott, and like some of those other like big zappers, right? If you're getting like 1,000 zaps from them, is that any different than in terms of like content valuation from getting from say like a pleb who literally only has 1,000 sats in their wallet and they zap you 21 sats, right? Like I'd argue that those 21 sats are worth way more in terms of like your content's value than JP one of those guys zapping you 1,000. So like there's an element of you can that it's how big is your wallet, right? So it doesn't really provide you feedback on what's your real value. But when it comes to likes, everyone has one vote and only one vote, right? And so it's actually a very democratic sort of like system, because at the end of the day, that's all you can do. And so when you see that your post has 121 likes, like holy cow, like there's a lot of people who really appreciated what you've written, and they've looked at it and they've seen it, and and it took them just a fraction of a moment, but like it resonated with some people enough for them to do that. Whereas like if you had like one like and 10,000 snaps, it's probably just because you memed them, or you did something that people wanted to be controversial and be like, oh, look at that, I want to make a big impact, and then make a crazy amount of zaps. But was it really because their content was worth something, or someone just wanted to make a statement, right?
It's so much more manipulable too, because like let's say you're Joe Biden and you post a tweet and you said, I want all Americans to start eating bugs or whatever, and then George Soros comes in with like 2 Bitcoin worth of zaps and just zaps Biden's tweet. Like if you don't have something to like ratio Joe Biden's tweet with like how ratios work on Twitter, where it's like more comments than likes, right? Then that shows kind of a rate that tweet was unwelcomed or ratioed or whatever you want to call it. Then people would be like, people support Joe Biden's order for Americans to eat bugs because it's got 2 Bitcoin of zaps behind it. And so it's like
the polls right now on Nostr. It's like, okay,
right, but you don't poll every post.
They don't mean anything because the votes are counted by how much is zapped to each
right.
Not how many. Yeah, that needs to change if they're ever going to be taken seriously. But I think it comes down to the whole: what are your goals and what's your perspective? How are we quantifying this? And I do love the way that Will phrased that question. because that's really what it comes down to. It wasn't what's better, likes or zaps, because that's an obvious answer. If I have to pick, hell, I'd
Right.
rather have somebody zap me than like me. Of course, it's better. But he asked, would you rather have 120 likes or 21 sats and zaps for
Individual
one person?
engagement events. Let's put it
Right,
like,
right. So, what's
yeah.
your goals? Is my goal at the end of the day when I'm interacting with people on Nostr and when I'm putting my content out here? If your goal is I want to get as many zaps as possible, I want to see a sat return from this, and we'd all love to see like hell. That's the dream. Let's go make money on social media. If that's your goal, if that's your mindset, you're going to be somebody that leans on the side of I want more quantity of zaps versus the quantity of people giving me the zaps. It doesn't matter if it's 21 people that give me one zap or one person gives me 21 zaps. It's all the same thing. My thing, I approach Nostr and I approach all social media because I cast a wide net as I am a content creator, I'm an educator, and I'm here to network and communicate with as many people who are interested in the topics I talk about as possible. Because I'm here to teach and I'm here to try to preserve a dying art. So that means I need to reach a broad audience. The more I see engagement, the more individual people I see engaged with me, the more I know what I'm doing is resonating with more people. So a higher amount of likes is a better thing to me because I'm not doing this to make money. If I was trying to make money with my content creation, I would quit and go do something that makes more money. Because I can tell you right now, in over a year of doing this, I've probably made maybe $90 and spent more than that. So I'm doing it for a reason that's not to make Bitcoin. I'd love to
Yeah,
make Bitcoin too. And guess what? I'd love to get those zaps. I'd love 121 zaps. That's awesome. If somebody wants to do that, amazing. But to me, right now, the goal is to reach more people and to build my network. And I'm here to stack plebs, not stack sats. I'm going to stack sats no matter what. I'm here to network. That's why I'm on a social media network and I'm not on a freaking trading platform buying shit.
yeah, I've put hours and hours and hours into creating memes. Like I have so many fucking memes I've created since we started Nostr. Since I started with Nostr in December, and I did all this for a viral marketing campaign for Nostr because we don't have a CEO and we don't have a business and we don't have like. I mean, you kind of get like open sats and maybe some of these other things that can kind of fund development or whatever, but there's no money being pumped into marketing. And so the reason why I'm here is because I'm like diehard dedicated to the Bitcoin and, freedom money and freedom information message. And so I'm here to try to do whatever I can and whatever I have within my ability to share information on Bitcoin and Nostr and try to make it, I don't know, do something that maybe people enjoy to do. And if I want to gauge the amount of hours that I've put into um, making memes versus the return that I've gotten in zaps, I mean, shit, I'd make a McDonald's worker look like Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's like I'm not here for the zaps. Like it's cool. Like I like the zaps because it kind of sets us apart from like the rest of these social media sites, and it's like enticing for people to come here because it's like come for the zaps, stay for the freedom information, right? But
I can see a model where
I'm all for it, and I love it, and I hope it. Like at some point, people are going to get huge, and they're going to get huge accounts on Nostr, and they're going to make a career out of getting zapped, and so that's great. And
yeah.
maybe if it's you or me or whoever, like that's awesome too. And I mean, I don't
Hey,
care.
that's
Like it
great.
doesn't have to be the way,
I'm
but
at the point where I'm like, fuck monetizing on YouTube. I'd rather make my money on Nostr if I can. There's much more. There is a much better chance that I'll actually be able to make some appreciable amount of money to stack working Nostr in the near future than I will getting 50% or 40% or whatever back that YouTube wants to give me of what people contribute. So that's great. I love that idea. I absolutely do. But at the end of the day, it's a long road on any social media platform protocol, wherever you're at, to be able to actually make that into a career. You've got to build that up. And most people don't do it. Let's be honest. Most of us are not going to make it big and be able to just live on social media. That's not why I'm doing it. But I can tell you what is far more valuable of a currency when it comes to the internet, when it comes to what we're doing, than Bitcoin. And that's people. That's community. And to me, that is why I don't want to abandon the idea of a like, or at least not find something better than the like. We should not expect people to compensate us monetarily for our content. It's great if they want to. I want to enable them to, but we should not expect people to have to give us money if they don't want to leave a comment.
And I
Yeah, I
think
think one of the things that Twitter's gone wrong is exactly that, where it's ultimately become that you have to essentially, if you want someone to leave a comment or someone to engage with you, right, you have to pay for it. It's essentially being paywalled because you're not going to get discovered. And so
Facebook's
unless
the
you're
same way
already
now.
big, right, you're not going to get discovered. And so that goes back to exactly what you're saying, where that's the problem, right? Like it's going the wrong direction. And similarly, when it comes to Nostr, like zaps are really good and it's a great feature to have. But if you sort of build everything around that only, you kind of lose what like the natural ability for people to find each other and provide value to each other without having to pay for it. And so like it's sort of like in the US where we have tip culture, right? But it's not a tip anymore. It's now become the norm where if you don't tip a waiter 20%, they look at you like you're some cheap ass. And
And you'll
like
start
there's
to
some
see
sort
people
like
start to segregate themselves or build classes based on the amount of expendable wealth that they have.
yeah,
Because suddenly
exactly.
people will start to get cliquish because they're used to hanging out with their buddies who are whales and tipping them 10,000 sats for a cool meme. And that guy only ever tips 5 sats. Yeah, well, that guy might have to scrape up change on the floor of his car to afford ramen noodles too. And we lose that because we've boiled everything down to a numbers game. We forget the people that are behind it. And I feel like, what's the point of social media? So why are we all here? What is it that makes Nostr so different? Why are we so happy to be here? Because we're suddenly free from the algorithms that have been manipulating us to extract money from our pockets for our experiences and our time. So
I think an interesting
last thing we want to do is be over here and suddenly let's monetize the entire experience so that it's only about money. We're doing the same thing. We're just not, instead of creating an algorithm, we're creating a way for that money to get distributed over a centralized area. But is it centralized? Or are the people who talk the loudest and post the coolest things getting the most money? I'm not against people being compensated at all in any way, but it shouldn't be mandatory and it shouldn't be made to feel like the standard that you have to.
Well, it also shouldn't be like socially mandatory, right? Like again,
Exactly.
like tips aren't mandatory, but they're socially mandatory. And
Right. They're
so
heavily expected and you're judged if you don't.
exactly, and so like we can't have that sort of similar culture develop here. And so I think one of the things that's interesting to think about, I think the whole like likes, the heart has been tainted, right, because of Twitter and because of the algorithms and stuff like that. And I think that's where you see a lot of the pushback here is simply because of that holdover. Whereas I think if all the clients were to move away from a heart and move away from calling it a like and just the shaka or whatever, that could actually make a perceptible difference in the acceptability of it. And I think like people start seeing it sort of this way, in that it's not just it's not an algorithm food, right? You're not just clicking it for that,
Right.
but it's actually a legitimate democratic vote of support for someone's
Exactly.
post or
And I'll
video.
tell you right now, if I zap you, I probably like you too. I do both. I don't do one or the other. It's not an all or nothing type thing. If I send somebody a zap, I almost always like it. And
Yeah, I
I
would
think
say
most people
I'm
do
pretty
that too.
similar too. It's almost
Yeah,
both
yeah.
almost.
The other thing now, and me and Satoshi Puzzles went round and round, back and forth a little bit on some of those because he was playing devil's advocate and just trying to like keep the debate going, which I totally respect. But his point, which I did agree with, was that okay, well, why are we going to basically have the equivalent of an upvote and not a downvote? And really, what we should do is just enable everything, let all the emojis, all the different things be there. And I was like, hell, you know what? Telegram does it. It works. It's fun. I'm okay with that. I am always okay with anything that is more freedom to the end user. And I want us all to be able to have the ability to turn it all on and off for our particular individual experience. And that's fine. I think more freedom is always a good thing. On the other side of it, though, because to your point where we've had such an issue with the algorithms in the past, and that's why it's so tainted and why we want to move away from it, because we don't want that old perception. I absolutely get that. I'm not disagreeing at all. But my thought on it is none of that really applies here because we don't have an algorithm and it doesn't taint our like. None of it really changes anything. We may bring some old bad habits in, but you'll notice that when somebody shows up on Nostr, after a while, their behavior changes because they start to understand the culture. I don't see a toxic like culture here. I see people utilizing it in a way that's meaningful and not in a way to feed into an algorithm because they literally gain nothing. Some of the questions that I had in this debate were like, well, what if it's a bot? What if somebody's just like spamming you to try to boost your ego? Well, who benefits from that? Where do they actually gain anything from doing that? There's not really. I don't see that as a problem. And what if it is a bot? I can look at it and see who actually did it, and it's going to be pretty obvious.
I mean, it's no different with
But there's
Zapbots.
nobody's going to make somebody. It's just somebody trolling. Nobody's going to actually make a profit going out there and like spamming on Nostr right now because there's not an algorithm to game. So there's no incentive to do so.
It just seems weird to me this early on in the Nostr ecosystem that you do have people that are kind of like, I wouldn't say militant, but kind of jerky about wanting to socially promote disengagement. This is,
That's the thing too. Yeah, and I'm
like,
like, and these
we
people
should
are
we
like,
should be trying to strive for as much engagement, however possible,
right.
with each
These
other right
people
now.
are
Because
all generally very, very open-minded and very, very pro freedom and liberty and pro the idea of decentralization and whatnot. But then in this particular aspect, they're all about centralization, and we need to change this, and we should remove this feature from the protocol for everybody because I don't like it. And we're talking about 10% of the people
No, it's
wanting to make a decision for everybody, and that's why I argue back so hard on it. Not because I hate Zaps, but because I don't want ever to see Nostr become a place where one individual or one group of individuals decides what's best for the rest.
I think from a
and
psychological standpoint, that comes about because of the maxi culture, right? So, like,
True.
a lot of times people find shortcuts. And so when you sort of identify with, oh, toxic Bitcoin maxi, right? Like, that's been sort of like the thread for several years past. And so obviously, once we sort of moved over to Nostr, that sort of mindset has also moved along with it, right? And so and then on top of that, you say, okay, well, Zaps are Lightning, Lightning's Bitcoin. So, okay, well, then the natural sort of shortcut in thought process is, well, then I should be as only Zaps Maxi, because that's the way to go. That's what Bitcoin's all about, blah, 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 right? But that's just it's a shortcut holdover, right? To put yourself in a certain camp because that's what I've always believed in, and that's just what, so everything I do has to be in that direction. And so I think it's unfortunate, and it's kind of a side effect of, of Bitcoin, really.
the last thing you want to do right now is drive users away because they're just being completely disengaged. And so if people are coming over here and saying, "Oh, okay, checking this out," and they post something and they don't get any kind of comment or zap or like or whatever, then at some point they're just going to be like, "Well, this is boring. I'm getting out of here." Yeah, because
Well,
everyone wants to be heard, man. Like, this is at the end of the day, you're not
they
here
want a
and
familiar
posting stuff and
experience.
being active about it if you
Yeah.
don't want to be heard, right?
Yeah, and
Right,
I think
right.
that's
I
also
mean,
actually that's a really good point. When you sort of compare new users versus sort of like big OG users, and this happens on Twitter, it happens everywhere, right? Where you have those like big popular sort of people, and those they obviously exist here on Nostr as well. Those guys they get anything they post, regardless of what it is, they're gonna get zapped to oblivion, right? And like they're just gonna they have a very their minimum threshold of zaps is extremely high, and so for them that sort of, we'll call it like the dopamine hit, right, is always there no matter what they post. Whereas if you're a new user and you're just coming on board, like you're just not gonna get all the zaps on day one, like that, unless one of those big guys decide to at you and say, hey, this guy's new, like start zapping him, blah blah blah. But like unless that happens to you and you're just sort of like posting whatever, you'll maybe get like one like out of like every 10 posts. Like we all started, early on. If you think about like your early on sort of experiences on Nostr, you were like super happy to get just that one like because like, wow, somebody actually read what I wrote. Um, and so if you take away that opportunity, all you're going to create is just this little, in circle where people are just zapping each other for their own sort of inside jokes, and that's it. There's not going to be any other sort of engagement. It's just going to be this little closed community of 100 people, maybe if that, circle jerking. You know.
Well, we
Right.
can't forget that the average person that shows up on Nostr probably doesn't even figure out what the hell a lightning address is or how to actually add it to their profile for at least a freaking week. All along, trying to figure out what a relay is and how do I see other people and why doesn't anybody follow me. So the last thing we want to do is cripple them and remove the one thing they're familiar with.
That's a great point. Yeah, the one thing that they're familiar with.
Right. I mean, if they show up and nobody likes their shit, they're going to be like, well, shit. They may not even realize likes not there, but they're like, nobody likes my stuff. I post my stuff and it just goes out into the ether and nothing happens. I can
It's going to be
understand
like
that.
this thing's dead. No one's using it. This is a waste of my time.
Right.
Going back to somewhere where I can get likes or I can get comments or
Right.
retweets or whatever.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
about your point about the whole toxic maxis thing and everything, I get that. I totally get it. And hell, half the time I'd say I probably am a toxic maxi. But the reason I was so spicy on that note where I was like, hey, only Zaps is a cult, but it got people's attention, was, it's really, really easy when we get very tied up into a certain idea, or we're very passionate about something, we really believe into it. It's easy to fall for that extremism on either side. We've got people out there saying that Zaps shouldn't be a thing because that's unfair and blah, blah, blah. That's bullshit too. But we can't let ourselves go to these crazy extremes and alienate other people and alienate half of people or whatnot and start breaking ourselves down into these little cliques and subsects, especially this early on. We all need to remember that we've spent the entire time we've been on social media being manipulated by algorithms into little camps. So we fight and we engage and we build and pay advertising fees. We can't take those old bullshit habits and just bring them over here. The beautiful thing about Nostr is we're all on an even playing field. We're all humans. We're all in one tribe, and we may not all get along, and we'll all self-segregate and find our ways around. But let's not find new reasons to divide ourselves. We already have enough of those.
Bevel, are you still with us?
Yeah, mate.
Oh, sorry. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about as far as any topics or?
No, my eyes sort of glazed over when we brought up likes again and Zaps. It's
For the 30th time.
it's something that I fucking stopped listening to a month ago, and we're still going on about it. I just I honestly don't
All
get
right.
it. It's like, for fuck's sake, just stop talking about it. That's I just think everyone's just wasting so much energy on it, and it's just fucking bullshit. Do whatever you want to do. If you want to zap, fucking zap. If you want to like. You've got the choice. Move on. That's it. End of fucking discussion. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't give a fuck until somebody tries to tell me that I can't do one or the other. When they try to start taking away my abilities, or they're sitting there and ranting about you shouldn't be able to because this is a bad thing. Yeah, fuck you. I'll do what I want. I'll move to another client if that's what you want to do. But that's the only time I even want to get involved with it, because I don't give two fucks whether you turn only Zaps on or not.
Yeah, I couldn't give a fucking rat's ass, mate. I zap who I want to zap, and if I want to like them, I like them. If I don't, I don't. And if someone zaps me, well, good on them.
Exactly.
I just don't.
That's how it should be. We need more Bevos on Nostr. Hey, somebody go make like 5 Bevo insects right now. Let's do it.
I just don't have the time nor the inclination to dedicate one brain cell to it. Not one.
Yeah, it is a lot of noise.
As people start talking about it, my eyes glaze over, and I've just been sitting here listening to you guys coding some stuff on my website, and that's what I've been doing. So I can't even talk about it.
What's on your site, Bevo?
I just I've started a couple, I've got one called bevster.com. It's just I put together for newbies, just like Nostr resources and shit like that. Which all I'm trying to do is there's so much information, and it's all scattered. So it's just a resources landing page, pretty much. Just trying to put everyone's hard work in one spot.
I was gonna say you should talk to Puzzles, because I think he's been trying to do something like I think Renegade, you were talking to him for a little while too, about getting like a one-click sort of like new user setup new user in a box sort of like thing for Nostr. I feel like
I
these
think
are all
there's
starting
like
to sink in.
five or six of us and a couple different developers that are all doing similar to this. I've found 4 or 5 resource pages like Bevo's talking about. I've thought about putting one together myself. It's just like an onboarding thing for a project I've been fiddling with. And there's so many guys interested in it. I honestly feel like we need to find a time and get a nest together of guys who are just focused on onboarding. We need like an onboarding council of guys who just get together and brainstorm and try to find a way to make it easy. Like there's so many good ideas out there, but we're all doing our own thing, which is great. That's the whole idea of Nostr.
So
But I think the collaboration would actually fucking help.
if you go to Bevster, Biddish, if you go to bevster.com
Yep, I'm there.
and click on the Nostr page, Nostr tab.
My puzzles are the first one up.
Yeah, so those first two, like puzzles, and then Tony over at Habla, like that's a pretty good, like you don't need any more than that to get going, eh? Like I didn't want to, there are so many more resources that you could put into this, but I just tried to get something that's not going to overwhelm people. They can get up and going, get their zaps going, blah, blah, blah. And then just tried to have a few sections that people ask about. And each one of those links has got a plethora of information, mate. If you wanted to sit and go through every site and then every link within that site, you'd be here for a month of Sundays. So in my opinion, that is probably all that's required, and it's overkill. The next thing that I want to work on that I've been trying to put together is like an apps page. I've got Nostr apps there, but I wanted to dedicate its own page and have a devs page. Like I was talking to Ivan, he's working on his own site, and like Pablo, mate, he comes out with something new every fucking minute.
Yep.
And it's like I can't keep up, like you can't look at Nostr every day. So you're right, there does need to be a bit of a roundtable and then one resource where people go and look at and go, yeah, we could add this and we could add that. You haven't got this, what about that? And then like
I definitely don't want to centralize it, but I'd love to see some better onboarding experiences coming. Because that's the thing. All of us, so if we sit down and we build like a how to get on Nostr page, we're doing it from our perspective. And we miss out on all the shit that a new person sees. So, every time that I sit down and I collaborate with somebody else, and they give me honest feedback on something I put together, they point out 2 or 3 glaring holes in things or things I just wasn't even thinking about because my head's too far up my own ass. So I think the more people we could get together, if we got 5 or 6 really smart people who are all dedicated to the same idea together, imagine the shit that could come out of a nest like that, man.
Yeah.
But I like it. What you got together over here on this page, Bevo, is like you took my Nostr journey over the last few months and just put it all in one place. You said a month of Sundays. That's what I feel like I've spent trying to figure all this shit out.
Yeah, and like
those are all great links.
Yeah, I just threw a couple. I haven't even started on the Bitcoin page. I've been trying to work on the Nostr page and filter out what I should and shouldn't put.
I like that you added that zap tag up in there, man. That little zap button. That's
I already zapped you.
Yes.
I just been fucking sweet, guys. Thanks. And just playing with stuff like that. Like I've got the Nostr chat, and just so that people can see what's available and what you can do when they go there and say, oh, what's that Nostr chat? And you can sign in with your MPub and, you can put a Zap Me button to your MPub. Just trying to help people, I guess. And then, so I just need a couple more tabs to round it out. Like I said, devs and a more focused apps page. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a pretty basic site, but I didn't want it to be complicated. It just had to be clean and the right colours and a couple of images. That's it.
The only thing I'd tell you right now,
I like the color combo.
I like it. It's great. The feedback I'd give you there too would be like put something about like Albi somewhere near where your little Zap button is, or somewhere close enough to the top, because that's a huge resource for people who are, especially on a website or on like a web browser, getting involved. Yeah. Being able to sign in and out of things and being able to actually have a Lightning wallet, that will probably you want to give people a way to be able to use that Zap Me button. So,
Well,
but
you're supposed to fucking start with either link below for the first 5 minute setup guide. That's
right,
you do that, right? And then you'll know what it is.
right, right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
get you. I love it. I love it. You did good work, man. You've been busy.
yeah. Um, and I had to change a few things here the other day. Like I had the word ledger in there a couple of times,
Uh-oh.
but
Cool.
I
It's
dropped
a
the bomb on
dirty
them.
word.
I dropped the bomb on them cunts. Fuck them. Um, I mean, like we did a nest on it the other day, and I actually didn't watch it before I did the nest when we were talking about it. I went and watched it after the what Bitcoin did when Pascal was, you know,
Mhm.
and my thoughts and ideas on what Ledger did. He basically verbatim said it, so I understood what he was trying to do. He just fucked it up in the delivery, and what he said was, I don't know if you've all watched it, but what he said was the marketing team fucked it up. It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't buy that, Pascal. But what he bangs on about, and the reason that I had Ledger was on the orange pilling page. The reason I had Ledger is it's easy. And if you guys know more than anybody, when you try and talk to somebody that has fucking never been here before, mate, it's overwhelming. So like the Ledger it's where I started. It was super, super easy. And so I think there's a place for it, just like there's a place for was. And
Mhm.
I really hope that Ledger, this is what I hope. I hope that Ledger scrap what they're doing and they bring out a brand new piece of hardware and they say, here's this service on this piece of hardware, and these are the cons for using this. But it's fucking super simple. If you want to, here's all the disclaimers, and if you're not happy with that, then go and get a proper hardware. And the reason why I still haven't 100% bagged them is they throw a lot of money at making these things safe. Like they fucking hacked Trezor before this other guy just did. I posted about the other day. They hacked Trezor and they did it like in 5 minutes. Then they get on the phone to Trezor and say, "You bunch of cowboys, fucking do this, do that." And they, that dungeon that they've got. All they do is try and break shit, and not only their own, they break all the other hardware wallets. And it's not to get an advantage because they don't use it in that way. They approach them and tell them their problems, fix it, and then they announce it.
It's white
And
hat hacking. It's they're doing it for a noble purpose. They're going in to break it so they can expose the flaws versus going in to break
yeah,
it for some monetary gain. Right.
yeah. And so I still think there's a part of their core there that is right. And what Pascal is saying about if we want mass adoption, he broke down the wallets. Like there'd be
Mhm.
lucky to be 10 million ledgers out there when you look at the number of wallets and the number of hardware things that have been sold, etc. So for us to get like 200, 300, 400 or a billion people to hold Bitcoin and start using it, there's got to be an easier way than what we currently do it.
Right. I can
And I,
appreciate that they're trying to make it easy for new people. I can appreciate what they're trying to do. We all agree that it's not the best way, that it's not the safest way, and that there are serious flaws in it. We all know that, but we beat that to death. We can't
yeah,
forget that
but
we all came from being not understanding what a seed phrase was. We all
yeah,
came from fiat. We all probably had our foray into shitcoinery, but
yeah.
we all love to hate on it and bag on people who are new to it and treat them like they're second class citizens because they're not Bitcoin maxis. And we can't do that shit because we all came from somewhere too,
The
you know?
fucking maxis have got to pull their fucking head in my opinion.
Right, right. I'm all
Um,
about it. I'm totally Bitcoin maxi, but I don't want to be the Bitcoin maxi that shits on everybody else who used to be me.
well, mate, you got to meet people where they are, not where they need to
Exactly.
be. So, you know, like the idea of this site, as I'm going to try and build it out, is just to make it really, really basic and hopefully someone gets some use out of it. And I went in there on the orange pilling page, like it's just a way that I've found successful to orange pill people. And I had on there Ledger and Cold Card, and I changed it to Blockstream Jade and or the Cold Card when they progressed to that. And that was after talking with you, Fiend, because I said, "What do you think, mate? Like we need another basic, easy, cheap wallet."
Yeah,
And
to me that's the Jade.
yeah,
A couple points to what you were saying, Bevel. Like they're not going to do it the way you would like them to do it because they want to push the subscription, and so everyone's got the ledger already that they're comfortable with, and they don't anticipate that everyone's just going to go buy a new upgrade. And this is another problem I have when we say that ledger is a great introductory hardware wallet. It's like, yeah, it is, but at some point, like you're going to get to a point where now you're going to need buy another one, and so it's like what,
and
like,
that's
yeah,
mate, and
you know what I
that's
mean?
totally fine. That's totally fine, mate. Like I don't care. Like if you spend $100 on a or 150 on a ledger, and then 12 months later you've gone down the rabbit hole, chances are you've got a reasonable amount of Bitcoin, and you'll start looking elsewhere, and then you'll go and buy a cold card. So I don't have an issue with it, eh? I really don't.
Yeah, I
What I
agree
have
with
an
that,
issue
but
with,
I guess if we don't have an alternative, right? Because like
yeah,
we do have an alternative, because Jade. I think people probably need to learn more about the Jade, because I set up my buddy with it, and it's just as simple as Ledger. And then
yeah,
you don't have to go. You don't have to buy a starter pack, right? You can just buy like something that you can just keep that is Bitcoin only, doesn't have shit coins in the firmware and whatnot, and isn't doing like this
mate,
wallet
you're not
connect
getting
stuff
any
or
arguments
whatever.
from me. I'll
Yeah,
only,
no, right. I'm just saying, like, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying, like we have alternative. Like that's kind of the point. Is like my girlfriend has one, right? And so now it's like I was telling her about this, like, oh, I got to buy another hardware wallet. And I kind of felt bad. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah, I
yeah,
don't.
like,
It's this space, mate, and I'm a realist. Ledger's not going anywhere, right? They've
No,
got
they're
a
not.
big company, big money. They're entrenched everywhere. All these fucking YouTube fuckers, push a push their barrow, so they're not going anywhere. So that being said, I really wish he would withdraw what he's done, get a new fucking product, and segregate it, and even put it under another name. Like, and capture that part of the market. I mean, all it was is a
Right.
money grab. He
It
goes in under
is.
the guise of, we're trying to make it for the mass adoption, which it is, but that's not their driving force. Their driving force is to bolster the bottom line, and this was easy money because there are a
They've got a
shitload of
market.
people
They've
out
got a
there that
market.
don't want to look after their seed, and
Well,
they
and
make
at the end of the
every
day,
every
that's
business wants to push a subscription model nowadays. Every single business in the world, if they can, they can try. They're going to try to push a subscription model because it's just guaranteed money they
yeah,
can bank on every freaking month.
yeah,
right. Well, and then if you think about it too, like you said, I'm not at all defending the bullshit that they're pulling. I think it's a bad thing overall, but they are catering to a market that wants that. There are a lot of people who maybe are not into Bitcoin because it's hard and it sounds complicated and it sounds scary. And they're used to being able to call up their bank and say, I lost my password. I need you to help me. They want that. They feel more secure with that safety net. So they're okay. And if it sounds like a reasonably more secure solution than their bank, which I will say that three different institutions holding your keys is probably better than what you're dealing with an average fiat establishment. So yes, it is probably more secure than you're used to. Is it secure by Bitcoin standards? Fuck no. But most people, let's be honest, we're all looking at this from a Bitcoin perspective. Somebody who's been in it for a while, somebody who wants to possess and hold their own keys. Most people still look at it like stocks and bonds. Most people don't understand it. They're not where we are. So if anything, if they're out there and they're going to further adoption, great. But we all look back at that journey along understanding Bitcoin. Most of us came into the shitty cryptos, then we got our Bitcoin, and then we started realizing I shouldn't leave these in some custodial wallet and I should be self-custodying it. Maybe this self-custody solution is vulnerable. Maybe I should start looking at cold storage. We've come down that path. They're not there yet. They're way further down that path. And if the entry point is like a cold card where you have to scan a QR or transfer an SD card to be able to move your money around, 90% of people will never fucking do it. So I can appreciate what they're trying to do, but at the same time, I feel like it's not necessarily the best thing at all.
the
What's going to
execution was
happen is
appalling.
the majority of hardcore Bitcoiners are going to move away from Ledger, and they're going to have a whole new marketplace, and they're probably going to make more money doing it. And that is what it is, you know.
I mean, I'm still going to keep mine, and because I'm migrating to cold card, but you can still use it in a multi sig, like
It's fucking
John.
better than keeping it on wallet of Satoshi. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the word it's bad when you consider the fact that it's supposed to be cold storage and nobody else has access to your seeds. That's a betrayal, and that's why everybody reacts so badly. But in the grand scheme of things, keeping your Bitcoin on a ledger is no more insecure than keeping it on a fucking wallet on your phone.
Oh, I think it's way more secure.
Oh, I'd agree. But like in the grand scheme of things, you can't. That's the problem. Is we have a handful of people who are very, very vocal who will look at somebody who has a ledger and will immediately go, "You're a shit coiner, and I want nothing to do with you." And
It's the same.
that's the issue.
It's the same as when they look at you and tell them that you run a Raspberry Pi.
Oh man, who wants my
Uh,
regular pie? Highest bidder, come take it, please. I'll pay for shipping.
Yeah.
No,
hey,
hey,
if they're a little tart, I'll put some ice cream with my Raspberry Pi. Okay.
last piece of perspective that I got on this too is like, dude, it is, guys, it's fucking not easy to orange pill people.
You're
Like
right.
sometimes,
It's
like
not.
it took me fucking years to orange pill my boss, and so like, I wanted to give him the most easiest, convenient, like most commonly used route into getting into Bitcoin. And to me, I kind of correlate what happened with Ledger to like try to like. I didn't do this, but say you orange pilled, you spent a better part of a year or whatever getting in people sharing articles, finally getting people to come around it and be like, okay, I'm ready. And then all of a sudden, you put their fucking money. You told them to put their money in BlockFi and get some yield. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, fucking BlockFi went under and they lost all their fucking money. And so, to me, it's not the same, right? Because obviously, this is like way less riskier than doing something like that. But to me, like if I give advice out, if I'm orange pilling somebody and I give advice out for somebody to buy a ledger, and then all of a sudden, 6 months later, after they finally bought their first Bitcoin and they have their Bitcoin on a ledger, and then ledger pulls the shit, and I got to like fucking go after the fact and text them and be like, hey, dude, you might want to go spend $150 and go buy a new hardware wall because I fucked up and gave you bad advice. Like that sucks too,
No,
and that makes people even more wary. Maybe they were wary to begin with, and then maybe they're starting to get comfortable, and then maybe they get wary again, right? And I guess this is just another thing I kind of thought about
I don't think I'd ever
during
advise anybody. I'd never
this
orange
whole
pill
event.
somebody and be like, "Go get a ledger." I don't think I would ever, in good conscience, do that. But at the same time, I'm not going to think somebody's like a shitty person or stupid or a bad Bitcoiner because that's how they self custody right now and that's what they know. I'd be like, well, that's cool, but let's have a conversation about why I don't use that because of my concerns, and maybe they'll change their own mind. But I'd like them to make that choice. I'd rather educate people than that's the problem. We
Yeah,
have so
I
many people
want.
who would rather judge you and talk shit about you than actually educate you about why they feel the way they do and let you make your own educated choice.
My nirvana is I want Ledger to fix this. Like I said, their resources and their dedication to producing a secure product until they bought this shit out is, fucking unparalleled. And the couple of things they need to do, in my humble opinion, are one is make their source open code, and they said they're going to do that. When and how much, who knows? And the second thing is, I still want them to have this subscription thing or whatever it is to cater to that market to help with the adoption, but it needs to be a separate device and maybe even call it a different name. Do you know what I mean? Like it
I
needs to.
wholeheartedly agree. I think like there's needs to be stepping stones. You can't go from 0 to 100. It just doesn't work. It doesn't happen, especially for something like this. Like Fiend, you were saying, like it's difficult to orange pill. Was I think it's no different to the whole like custodial non-custodial sort of conversation, right? Where it's like you need both of them. Quite frankly, Waz is like the easiest way to onboard someone into the ecosystem. There's a lot less riding on it because it's lightning and it's because it's small amounts of money. And we're not talking about cold storage, which is like quote unquote life savings, right? So it's a lot less stakes. But the fact is that the onboarding process is no different in that someone needs to have something simple to use, something that's comfortable, something that has a little bit of a safety net built into it, where you're not 100% responsible for everything that's happening. Because quite frankly, a lot of people don't trust themselves, and that's a big hurdle when you're telling people that, hey, let's switch to this better system, but you're fully responsible for your money. And they're going to say, hang on a second, like I need a little bit of hand holding here. I need a little bit of a backup just in case I screw this up, because I always screw things up, right? And so, especially then when you go, okay, well, now we're talking about life savings amount of money. We're talking about, this is the stuff that you keep ultra safe. Well, then I definitely want someone to help me out here just a little bit, at least until I get it, right? And so, Bevo, to your point, like having a separate product, a second product under a different name, that by no means can be confused one with the other. It looks different, it sounds different, it smells different, right? Like it needs to be a completely different product that has that built into that backup built into it, where if you screw this up, yes, you can, contact us to recover it, but and with a big disclaimer saying, look, this is much less secure than the other option that we have, and lay it out. Like I think it's part of the whole transparency thing, and like we need to
Yeah.
follow sort of like Bitcoin's lead on this, right? Like
I
it's
mean,
all about transparency and
can,
option.
can you imagine rocking up to my 75-year-old mum, right, with a cold card and say, right, mum, want you to transfer 20 grand out of your bank account across to Coinbase, and we're going to buy some Bitcoin. Then what we're going to do is we're going to roll 100 dice to get really good entropy on your seed phrase. Then we're going to fucking watch a 2-hour tutorial on the cold card. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go across and get Sparrow Wallet. We'll watch a couple more tutorials on that, right?
And you're going to understand all the terminology that's used along the way too, right? You're going to understand
And
all
what
of
we're
it.
going to do is we're going to put a bit of Bitcoin on it, and then we're going to delete that, everything that we just did, and then we're going to redo it to make sure you can access it. And I don't know if you've done that on a cold card, but that's very labor intensive. And I'm like, it ain't going to fucking happen, mate. It ain't
Right.
going to happen.
I mean, let's be
Never.
honest. We got 70% of the population still puts the majority of their money in the hands of a fucking financial advisor because they don't trust themselves with it. So we're dealing with this. Imagine if nowadays, and they don't teach finance or how to actually count fucking change or anything like that in school anymore. But imagine if when you went to school and you started to learn about money, what they did teach you about what money is, even if it was a lie. If instead of here's how we count back change, here's how we understand money, here's how to write a budget. Imagine instead of learning that, they started off with, okay, kids, today we're going to learn about here's what a 401k is, and we're going to talk about annuities.
Yeah.
You can't start people off like that. This is a whole different method of finance. It's a whole different way of thinking about finance. And even people who are very financially literate have a hard time wrapping their mind around it because it's a fundamental shift. So we can't expect people to abandon all of the familiar fiat ways and safety nets immediately because that's where we are.
Yeah.
But to that point, though, we do have to continue to hammer home self-custody, because if people stay lazy and don't want to continue to hold their money on exchanges, we're just going to get more and more paper Bitcoin and more market manipulation, like we saw with
Agreed.
FTX.
We need to promote the gold standard, but we need to help people build to that place. They're going to need stepping stones to get there. They need
Go ahead, Beva.
The thing, you just got to take responsibility for the people that you orange pill. If they're buying $200, get fucking Ledger with the seed phrase backup shit, whatever. Couldn't give a fuck. Whatever you're comfortable with. But if they come to you and you get them pilled and they go, I'm going to buy a full Bitcoin, then you have a different conversation. Yeah? You say, look, let's do that, but we need to spend a week going over, a couple of hours every day going over some things until you get this in your head what to do.
Right. They got a lot more skin in the game there. It's a lot more serious conversation. Man. Yeah.
It all comes back to tools need to exist. And Bevo, I know you don't want to talk about this, but it goes, similarly, like just coming full circle, likes and zaps, you need both. They both
You're breaking up.
There.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
No, but that's all I'm going to say about that. The tools need to be there. I just wanted to bring it full circle here. Like the tools need to exist, and that you need the options and the ability to, once again, meet people where they are, be able to tailor their experience to the circumstances that they're in, and have the tools to meet those needs. And so if you're, if you maxi and say it's only cold carded or nothing, well, then it's going to be nothing. A lot of people are going to pick nothing. And so Yeah. So hey guys, like I've got to run. I've got another meeting actually I need to get to. And just a shameless plug here. I'm potentially starting a record company here. A record label,
Nice.
Cannabis Records.
Do you
Hell
sell
yeah.
vinyl?
Yeah. So more on that later. It doesn't really have much to do with anything to do with Bitcoin other than obviously we're integrating all of that into the retail store. But
Do you say
um,
Cannabis Records?
yes, sir.
Okay, I I,
Uh,
I, I know a guy that may want to help you with some marketing. He's
yeah.
doing the
Yeah.
marketing for a cannabis magazine on Nostr right now. So I definitely want to hook him up with you.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Throw me some names or whatever because
Yeah,
we're,
I'll
we're
shoot
we're
you.
we're
I'll shoot
actually
you
a
a
record
DM.
label. So we've got a couple artists already signed, but we're opening a retail store. We've got a pretty interesting concept. But more on that a little bit later. But I do have to run. But it was great talking to you guys, and
Yeah.
I'll see you guys at the next one.
For sure.
Appreciate you joining us and co-hosting on this Nostr Nest with our audience of 0.
Good hanging out.
Absolutely. Hope they enjoyed it.
Hey, audience, did you guys enjoy this? Oh, yeah, you did? Great. Okay, awesome. Well, we got 100% feedback.
If after the fact you enjoyed this, be sure to provide value for value on fountain.fm.
Yeah. Make sure to zap the shit out of me. If you like the shit out of me, fuck you.
Right?
All right, we'll see you,
Don't
man.
you fucking dare like my post. Fuck you.
How dare you like my stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, one more point to the whole ledger thing. I think it's just, I think it's bad company organization as well because,
Yeah.
like Bitbox, they're a shitcoin company. They have a hardware wallet that's for shitcoins, and they have a hardware wallet that's Bitcoin only. And while I know you can add the app or whatever and make it a Bitcoin only hardware wallet, I think the Bitcoin community would embrace that hardware wallet more if they kind of made their own device that was specifically for the diehard Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
It didn't cut any corners. It didn't, it was open source. Didn't have any potential backdoors to keys leaking. And some of a lot of the other bells and whistles that maybe some of these other hardware wallets like Cold Card or the Foundation.
Ledger, that's your subscription. You're milking the people who want the easy path. You're milking them for that money, and that's okay. Those people are probably willing to pay it because they're willing to take the risk. For them, the convenience is worth more than the security. But then make yourself something like, I don't know, call it something crazy like the vault, the lockdown, whatever. Just make a super secure Bitcoin maxi self-custody hardcore cold storage wallet and market that, because then you're actually appealing to both market. Because I think the Bitcoin maxi market and the onboarding new people market are two different worlds, and you're going to alienate one of them if you try to market primarily to the other.
Yeah, and like Bevel said, their white hat hacking is really good, and so I think they have more than enough competence as a company to be able to create a really nice Bitcoin only hardware wallet. And I think the Bitcoin community wouldn't lash out nearly as much against Ledger as they have. I mean, this is not the first time, obviously with the data leak beforehand and whatnot.
Right.
The Bitcoin community is kind of going full horns at them before, and so this is, you could potentially like bridge the gap and maybe create some more goodwill with the Bitcoin quote unquote maxis if you did something like that.
Show some effort towards their goals. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And then you give people options too, and so it's like, who doesn't like options, right? We were talking earlier about options.
All for freedom. If you want to choose to be stupid, I support your decision, as long as you actually have the choice to do it and you don't want me to have to do it too.
Hey, last thing I wanted to, we can wrap this up too. I know British is gone. We'll wrap this up here in a couple of minutes, but I also wanted to mention that Jimmy Dore, I don't know if you guys know who Jimmy Dore is, really popular podcast host, has like 1.2 million subscribers. He's traditionally been a lefty, which is interesting because, the lefty community really has not taken to embracing the Bitcoin. But I will say with Jimmy Dore recently, he has kind of shifted more towards the libertarian side of, he's also kind of one of the lefties that is willing to reach outside the aisle and just kind of, he's like a truth seeker, right? He's less, a divisive side taker, and to kind of bring this conversation full circle.
Oh, sorry. The ones
Yeah,
who have good intentions find their way there. Just like the guys who are like extreme fucking far right, where it's like obnoxious and they're just dumb. They may have good intentions, and they usually find themselves more towards the middle grounds eventually. It's the ones that are just there for the freaking attention that are obnoxious and you can't stand.
yeah. And so most of his show's content is basically like exposing the corporate media as fraudulent. He's anti,
Right.
exposing the vaccines. He's also about exposing, the politicians, and mainly focuses on going after the Democratic side of the politicians to kind of expose their corruption, at least the establishment Democrats. And so it was just interesting to see because he covered the RFK Bitcoin conference speech, and he had Max Kaiser on as a guest, and it's a nice 50-minute segment that's on YouTube where he basically just got orange pilled like on the spot by Max Kaiser, and he kind of understood the importance, and kind of they went over like the trucker thing, and just all the kind of the talking points that RFK had kind of made during the Bitcoin conference and whatnot. And so I think he's an important bridge. Whether you're obviously the left is the left, right? But we Bitcoin is apolitical money, and we do need people from all over the world and all sides of the aisles and every perspective in life to adopt Bitcoin. And so I think he could potentially serve as an important bridge to kind of bring this idea of Bitcoin over to the left, and maybe hopefully help uncover and expose, assuming he's been thoroughly orange pilled at some point, some of these fucking lies about Bitcoin that lefties totally try to hammer, like the
Oh, yeah.
ESG environmental shit or whatever. Like at some
Yep.
point, we need somebody on their side to go after it, and because they're going to listen, right? They're not going to listen to the MAGAs. They're not going to listen to the libertarians,
No.
right? Because those are perceived threats, and so it doesn't matter what you say. You're going to scream
Yep.
till your fucking turns blue in the face, and so I thought it was a pretty important moment because for a long time I know he has not been on board with Bitcoin. He's kind of been part of the I don't really understand it, and so I don't really care about it side. But
Right. It's been traditionally the people who are more capitalist minded that adopt it first. But I mean, eventually, yeah, they're going to come around. They're going to see the utility. But I mean, let's be honest, even on the right, there are plenty of people who don't understand Bitcoin and will talk shit about it all the time. So like you're right. Both people, both sides of the aisle, all different perspectives and all different, just walks of life will eventually be here. And we kind of have it easy right now, and in regards to Bitcoin and Nostr, and that the majority of people here, even though we have our squabbles, are fairly like-minded and are here for a reason. But it's
is that
not
your
always going to be
rooster?
that. And yes, that's a rooster, and we'll have to understand that there's going to be some patience. We're going to be tried a little bit going forward because people that think different than us and that don't align with our particular values on everything are going to be here in our space, and that's something that we'll just have to adapt to.
Well, I think maybe not embrace or maybe the argument and the divisiveness of it, but embrace the fact that we're going to get new members of this
Oh
planet
yeah, find.
onboarded onto Bitcoin. It's
I
only going
think
to
it's
help the
more important for
cause.
people to start finding the similarities and the things that they do have in common to talk about versus immediately looking for the reasons to fight. And I think a lot of that goes away when we have less algorithms sitting there gaming it and trying to make us fight each other because it's good for the platform. I see a lot of people who have very different views than me on Nostr that I have great conversations with. So I
Yeah,
think we're on the right path, but it'll get rocky. I mean, hell, we just spent an hour going back and forth much to Bevo's chagrin about likes versus zaps. So even the people who agree can't always agree, but we all agree more than we disagree, and that's the funny thing. Even in the real world, if you want to call it that, in our world that's surrounded by media and bullshit in our society, where we're all left versus right and pitted against each other, we all have way more in common than we realize. We just don't talk about it.
yeah, and I think Jimmy Dore and Russell Brand is another one. I think are two people who identify on the left who both
Yeah,
are
Russell Brand's
starting
good shit
to
though.
yeah they're starting to understand Bitcoin more and more, and they also get invited onto like Tucker Carlson's shows and whatnot too. Whereas they don't even get invited onto like CNN and MSNBC, which is surprising considering they'd probably, if they told you which side of the aisle they're on, they probably told you they were left to center, right? But they don't get invited on the liberal media
Well,
shows. They
yeah,
get
because
invited on the conservative media shows, right?
because they started to question the narrative, so it's not comfortable. But of course, the other side's going to welcome it because look, somebody from over there is questioning the
Right,
narrative. Ha
right,
ha.
right. So I guess maybe they're used as a pawn, but it is what it is. But yeah, so I just wanted to state that because I know we kind of started our evening off with the left versus right thing, and I thought that was kind of a pretty more someone who's kind of quasi followed Jimmy Dore for a little bit as he's kind of ventured towards the more anti-establishment, maybe towards the more libertarian side as of late. I think it was kind of an important moment to see last night, so I watched. Definitely recommend if you guys are listening, anyone's listening to the show, check it out on YouTube. You can probably just Google or YouTube search Jimmy Dore with Max Kaiser. So,
Yeah, I'll check it out
oh
if I
yeah,
get a chance. Yeah.
so that's about all I got. I know you guys. We wanted to keep it abbreviated. We're over 2 hours, so I think I'll stop the recording here and we'll call it a night. What do you guys think?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Works for me. It's been a good chat.